My name is James Worthington. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Omnitude. We're a middleware layer connecting several different aspects of blockchain, Fabric in particular, but also Indy, Sovrin. Then we also interface with Stellar Network as well. A lot of what we want to do is build the platforms to enable enterprise applications to utilize and consume blockchain. As with most every type of application, it's very important for the identity management. So we've put together a solution that ties together several different components of identity management. We're very indebted to the various different parties like Indy, Sovrin, Evernym, and so on for what they have contributed, and certainly the Fabric component as well. What happens here in our initial implementation and consumption of the Omnitude ID is that we create essentially a Fabric ID, right? You've got your own user insert that you can use to interact with the blockchain. Then we create the Indy ID as well. Then we create the account for the users in Stellar. And it's not just the user side of things, right? It's also the organization. One of the key aspects and key components of Sovrin and Indy and all is the organizations, not just the individuals as well. So the first use case that we have for this here, this is what we're going to do a quick live demo of, is how a user then would create an Omnitude ID, use that to interact with various different e-commerce sites, decide how much, if any, of their data to share, and if they do share that, then to receive some sort of benefit from that. In this demo here, we're going to demonstrate that with the benefit being a payment from the organization. So, all right, I'm already down to only 6 minutes left, so let me do this real quick here. We'll just make up some name here, and I'll make the password the same, except I guess I have to put it in the box. And then punch the button to create the Omnitude ID. It takes a couple, 3 seconds here because we're going out now and we're creating the ID in the Fabric network, we're creating the ID in the Indy network, and we're creating the account then for the Stellar for this particular user. Now we get redirected, and hopefully, sometimes my typing gets pretty bad, but with any luck, I type the right password. I can log on. You can see now, of course, this is currently still just the test net. We go ahead and provide an initial balance. That was the creation of the account. You can then come in and put a lot of different information that you might wish to share with different parties, but of course you don't have to share that information. So we'll assume that for the moment I've typed all this in. I now have an Omnitude ID. I go out to a website and I say that I want to sign in. I'm going to sign in with my Omnitude ID. And you'll see that it starts to ask me which parts of my information would I potentially like to share with that particular e-commerce vendor. Again, I do not have to share any of this, but if I choose to, I want to make sure that everybody's in complete control of their data, when and where they share it, and not just in complete control, but to actually receive a benefit from that. So now you can see that I've logged on to this e-commerce site with my Omnitude ID, and if I come back over here to my account, I can actually now see that that transaction has come through. So the vendor paid me for releasing that information, allowing them to potentially, again, up to me to choose, but to access various different attributes about me. Maybe I wanted to share my clothing size, maybe I wanted to share my purchase history, whatever it might, maybe I wanted to share my email address, all the different types of information that the Googles and the Facebooks are now getting about you and selling to these companies. They don't even really know if it's accurate or not, but this way we can guarantee that it's validated, it's on the Indy network, and not only is it valid, but there's a proper exchange of value for the information that you have chosen to share. And if I were to, let's see, who did I sign on with there? That was Curator Box. Now I'm actually logging on as a user on the network, of the organization, except of course I've timed out here on something. Well, I'll use a different one real quick. Yes. Oh, of course. All right, one more. Yep. Glad you got better eyes than I do. I promise, it really does work. I've discovered there's a little lag and delay in here, and if I get a couple extra milliseconds in there, then we don't get through to the organization side. Please see me. I'll be more than happy to demonstrate this a lot better off. But I'll also, just to kind of double check here and show you as well, I'll go on and sign on to another e-commerce site. Yeah. That's what happens when you can't look through your glasses and type at the same time. I'll choose to share some information with this second site. I'm logged in over there. We come back over here and do a quick refresh. And now you'll see that second transaction has come through where the second vendor site has now paid me to access that information. So, sorry I'm running through this so quick. I'd like to talk in a lot more detail about how else we use this ID and what else we can do. I've got 2 minutes left on the time frame though here, so want to make sure that if I've got any questions that I can answer real quickly, or you can come up and see me afterwards, or we'd be delighted to discuss in detail a lot more about what's going on behind the scenes here, how we enable these microtransactions, how we enable the users to not only take control of their data, but to receive the proper compensation and benefit from when and if they choose to share that data. Any questions, comments, anything that people would like for me to address? I see someone back there. It's hard to see. Yes, sir.
Just curious around, are you running the validator nodes yourself, or is this running on some kind of public?
Currently,
where's the data start?
Currently, and I don't want to blame them, of course, but it's our internal network and we're the validator. As soon as the Sovrin network goes live, then we're going to re-rolling that over to them and interfacing directly with them and using the real Sovrin network and not just the Indy side of things. But that said, right, that's one of the big key questions in some of this whole process. Not everything is going to live in Sovrin or Indy, right? My hat size, right? Am I going to get an Indy cert or a Sovrin cert just to validate that, right? If you read through the Sovrin white paper, part of what they anticipated was that there would be various different domain providers that would provide information and validate different information outside of the main network. We're not going to do driver's licenses. We're not going to do passports, right? But Sovrin and Indy and those types of folks, they're not going to do hat sizes. They're not going to do transaction history. They're not going to do a lot of those other pieces of what all goes together to make up your identity. So we work hand in hand with them. We will be using the Sovrin network for the more major components of that, and then we provide the various different domain attributes that users and organizations might want to consume or share with other participants in the system.
Okay. Sorry, just for second question on that. With the demo you showed, it kind of seems like you're managing the keys and everything and access to that. So can one kind of argue that, you still kind of own that data and, I don't know, someone rogue could still...
Well, yes and no. That's a very good question. And we talked about that a lot. Most of us in this room, we're fairly technology savvy, right? We want to control those things ourselves. But in the real world, we're like 1% of the population, right? My mother is not ever going to use a wallet. My sister's probably not going to use a wallet. And I don't know, maybe this is shameful to say in front of this type of a crowd, but I actually don't want to use that myself. I don't spend that much time in cryptocurrency, so I chose to use Coinbase and let them keep up with my wallet. Now, that's not the answer for everybody, but it is going to be the answer for a lot of people. And so that's the initial use case. We call it the curated wallet, right? But it is all individual. You're the only one that can access it. It's actually all stored in Fabric as well. So it has to be accessed by the Fabric CA cert that's assigned to you and you only, and you're the only one that can access it. But we fully recognize there is the other side of that coin, right? Where there will need to be much more control of, allow users to control that themselves. We think that that's going to be a process over time, because right now you got 99% of the world that's not going to use a wallet and 1% that will, right? But as education continues, as people, over the next 5 to 10 years start to be more comfortable with how they manage that, then certainly that's one of the things that we're going to make sure is possible. But right now we want to get as much mass adoption of this as we can, and requiring my mother and my sister, some of the other folks in my family, to have a wallet in order to be able to take advantage of how they control and consume and share their data and get the reward for it. It's not going to happen if they have to do that themselves. So yes, fully recognize what you're saying, and we have to solve for both use cases. We're just solving for the more general one right this second. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. Who puts the price tag on the attributes? I mean, who decides?
Well, we have not determined that yet. That's going to be, of course, market conditions in some ways. That's actually, honestly, that's the stage we're in right now. We're in communication with all these people to try to get some ideas. We're going through our beta clients and beta testers to see what makes sense. And a lot of it's going to depend, of course, on the value of the information, right? My email address is a lot more useful to somebody than my hat size, right? They might not pay anything if I'm going to share my hat size. But we don't know the answer to that yet. We're going to have to find that out. So what do you think? How much would you demand, so to speak, if you went to a website and they said, would you share your email address with me? And you say, well, yes, but for how much money? So I'm going to throw the question back at you now, because we need this feedback anyway, right? We need to understand what the market conditions are in this economy for sharing that information. Would you demand 10 cents, $100? What do you think is a fair price for that?
I don't know, maybe somewhere between $1 and $5.
Well, that's kind of what we were thinking. That's our first estimate, but we'll have to see if that's what actually plays out in the marketplace.
I think just one sentence, I think there are quite interesting studies on this topic. They try to figure out how much worth an email address, or like, for example, a personal address is worth for Google or something like that. And I got one figure in mind, and this is like $8 for your personal address, something around that.
Well, and I'd read some studies somewhere in that range is what, if you could just go out and buy a blank email list, right? They tend to charge you somewhere in that range, but you don't even know how many of them are valid when you buy those email lists, right? See, this is actually the person whose email address it belongs to. So it's guaranteed to be accurate, and it's guaranteed that they want you to have it as well. So we think it's a lot more valuable in those conditions as well. Yes, sir.
So except that I can, put in lies. It has happened before. How do you, as a user, know where your data is actually going? Because the thing is, I sell my email address to, littlecornershop.com, who then go and resell it because they've actually got a network behind them. How do I track whether that's going on?
So there is, of course, some concern about that. We do vet the vendors, right, before we let them into the system. They also, as an organization, have to have an ID as well. They'll have to have an Omnitude ID, but that gives them the ID for Indy as well as for the Stellar network. And so we should be able to spot any of that kind of abuse fairly quickly. And as well, I think everybody knows, and the previous gentleman was talking about it as well, we've got to work with these underlying systems to actually not require the local storage of that data, right? And if you look again, read some of the Sovrin stuff, we're going to, it should really only be the information that you need to share. So right now, you've got to give them your credit card if you want to buy something, right? There's no way around that. But really, if you think about it, all they really need to know is they got paid, right? So as we continue to work through this process, right, we'll get to the point where, no, you don't give your credit card information to that vendor. It only goes to the bank, and the bank sends the certification back through us to say, here's your payment, it's been recorded, now you can go ahead and ship it, but you don't need to know the address that it's being shipped to either, right? So there's going to be a long transition till we get to that perfect ideal world. It's going to take quite some time, certainly it's definitely a risk and a problem as we stand here today, but we've got to get the basics in place first, and then we'll be more than happy to continue to move forward.
Because I think it affects a lot of the pricing, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I will give much more data to a company that says, we're not actually taking the data, we're just getting a payment, a payment out, and we're not keeping your credit card. Anytime someone says, can we keep your credit card on file? It's like, sure, because no one's ever been hacked and spilled out, 50,000 credit card numbers.
Well, and we may get into various different types of that sharing, right? So it might be, will you share your email address with me so I can send you confirmation of the shipment? Well, that might not even be worth a payment at all, right? But will you share my email address or your email address with me so that I can send you, marketing stuff? That might be yes, but for $50, right? So I think there's going to be a range in there of what is the purpose of that as well. And those are some of the things that we need the feedback from. Like I said, that's where we are right now in the process of trying to gather all that. And honestly, we'll probably make a few mistakes in that process as we learn and work through this. But the market will tell us what the answer is. Anyone else? Well, thanks so much for your time. I'd be delighted to continue these conversations more if anybody wants to, and I appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.